Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with my library tour. We are on bookcase number 2, shelf number 4, and we are finishing shelf number 4 today. And then we will move on to the summit of this particular bookcase, which I said last time that I had no idea how I was going to film it. I mentioned in a couple of these library tours that some of these upcoming shelves are extremely impossible to film and will require all sorts of ingenuity. And I got a bunch of emails in response to those comments a couple of days ago and also yesterday from some of you very touchingly worrying about me, saying, well, your surly houseboy isn't always there, and you're not a spring chicken anymore. Please don't put yourself in danger to film library shelves in situ. Feel free to take the books off the shelves and film them just sitting at a table. And I got one email last night from one of you. I'm sure you're watching because this appears to be the only thing on my channel that you watch. I got one email from one person saying, those shelves where it'll be really dangerous to you to film them, you're not going to skip them, are you? That's a viewer after my own heart. So no, I'll find a way. But I figured out a way to do the summit. I can't believe it didn't occur to me before. Of course, the problem is not where the books are. The problem is where the camera is. Oh. But anyway, we don't have to worry about that now. This is at least comfortable, this last shelf. And although it's a full shelf of books, it's not going to take any time at all to do. I bet this is a 10-minute shelf tour because we're dealing with long strings of books, which can be done fairly quickly. Like, for instance, there's this first string, which is it's a series that has a name, but nobody ever uses it. That must be very frustrating for the author. It's this. It's David McFarlane's The Rune Lords. It's a terrific fantasy series, high fantasy series, just amazingly good. And it has a whole string of these Darrell K. Sweet covers. But it's the series is not called The Rune Lords. That's all anybody ever talks about. I'm pretty sure that after a while, the publisher is this Tor just started referring to it that way instead of The Sum of All Men or something like that, which I think it has a series name. This is terrific. Not maybe so strong with the characters, but great with the world building. Oh my God, the magic system here will just keep you thinking forever. And the characters aren't so bad that they don't carry you through. This should have been a trilogy, of course, as all epic fantasy should be, but it isn't. It wasn't. So we have the Rune Lords, and then another copy of the Rune Lords. This thing with this ugly thing that they did to the cover, where they're touting the prices if you can't see it. So I have 2 of these, and I have absolutely no reason to have 2 of them. But then I think I have all the rest of them except one. I believe there's one of these that did not have a Darrell K. Sweet cover. Okay, that's book 5. Book 3. I think they get smaller as they go along, too. Yeah. Book 2 is Brotherhood of the Wolf. And then book 3 is Wizardborn. That huge thing on the cover there. See, you've got a procession of people meeting this huge thing. Then book 4, which is The Lair of Bones. And you can see these are getting just a bit shorter, and I believe they continued to get shorter as they went along. Then we have let's see here. So what was that last one? That was book 4. Then this is the 5th book. Just lovely, lovely cover there. Unfortunately, they decided to just sort of white it out with the copy on the back, but that is just wonderfully good. And then this one. The Wormling Horde does not have a number. It just says the saga of the Rune Lords continues. So I'm not really up on this series enough to know exactly where that puts me, but okay, so that doesn't need to be there. All right, there we go. But I'm fairly certain there's one other, at least one other that I don't have. Good epic fantasy. Definitely. I'm not one of those booktube channels. There are half a dozen booktube channels that I know of. Probably there are 3 dozen of them that I don't know of. that read only epic fantasy. Pretty much. That's all they read. And I just can't imagine that. I just can't imagine that. Epic fantasy, is an incredibly derivative subgenre. And I don't say that as in and of itself a criticism, since obviously I love romance novels. They're a pretty derivative subgenre as well. But I can't imagine only reading this kind of thing. But which is going to seem odd because that's almost all that this shelf is. Like, for instance, these next ones are The Way of Kings. These are the Stormlight Archives. They're so big. The books are so huge that you can actually just print the whole name of the trilogy on the spine. I have The Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, in these mass market paperbacks, and Oathbringer. And The Way of Kings, I reinforced because it was falling apart, but and you can't see really the details because there's a barcode on the back and everything. But The Way of Kings cover is so beautiful that I actually often use it as a desktop wallpaper. And these are these three came to me on the occasion of the publication of the fourth book, which I do not own in any form. It was, and it's again another little story, but this is going to be a quick shelf, so we have time for a little story. There are stories associated, I'm afraid to say, with 95% of the books in this library tour. As I've mentioned before, my library does not have a large constituent of books that I have not read. It's a very small percentage. And most of the stuff in the library has stories associated with it, as most of the things in my life do. But I've told this story on this channel, but it was thousands of videos ago, so I might as well again. I got... Way of Kings, I think, came out when I was not reviewing books. When I was in the Donoghue Interregnum, and I wasn't reviewing books. Then I came back to reviewing books, and I think I got Words of Radiance from the publisher. The galley copy, which I wish I'd kept, and then the finished copy, which I wish I'd kept, and got rid of them. And I think I wrote about Words of Radiance. I might not have. Then I got Oathbringer, the galley copy, which I wish I'd kept. It came in a box. It was really pretty. And then the finished copy, which I wish I'd kept. And I don't think I wrote about Oathbringer at all. When I get to epic fantasy series like this, whether it's Rune Lords or anything else, once it gets to book number 3, and I know that it's just going to go on, that book number 3 is not the Return of the King, it's not the conclusion of the story, I start seeing extremely diminishing returns as far as reviews go, especially for a mainstream journal. I mean, anywhere that I write would be a mainstream journal. I have never yet had the pleasure of writing for a specialist journal. I would kind of like to do that, whether it's military history or nautical fiction or fantasy fiction or science fiction or mystery. I've never made inroads into doing that. I would love to review books for a specialty genre, but I am, of course, a generalist reviewer, and all my reviews are for generalist venues, and it seems to me that there's less and less point to reviewing, book 4 or book 6 or book 16 in a fantasy series for a generalist audience. A specialist audience, sure, they're going to want to know from someone who knows the series really well what is interesting and what isn't, what's happening and what isn't. But the general reader, no, not so much. So I didn't keep any of these. I didn't keep any of them. I think I even cycled through a couple of trade paperbacks, big, beautiful trade paperbacks. I didn't keep those either. I remember seeing a hardcover of Way of Kings at the Brattle for $3 once. Dust jacket and everything, perfect condition. I just thought, you've already read that. But anyway, Words of Radiance is, The Way of Kings is really good. The whole series is really good. But when the fourth one came out, I think they're up to 5 now. When the fourth one was announced, I suddenly realized that I didn't have any of the other 3, and I sheepishly went to the publisher and said, I'd of course love a copy of the new book, but is there any chance that you could send me the other 3, because I keep getting rid of them. I keep getting them from publishers and getting rid of them. So I made a mental note to myself that when the publisher kindly agreed and sent these, I made a mental note to myself that when I got them, I would absolutely not get rid of them. But it turns out it was immaterial anyway, because I don't have any of the others. I think Stormlight Archives is up to 5 books. I don't have any of them but these 3. Okay, then we have more standard epic fantasy. This is Terry Goodkin. This is Wizard's First Rule. In this thick mass market paperback. Again, I have a lot of the ebooks. I might have everything on ebook by this author, but I don't have any of the others in book format at all. The only one that I ever see at the Brattle is, I think there was a book club edition of Wizard's First Rule. It's a small, squat hardcover. I occasionally see that, but not anything else. Okay, then we have a discordant note here, but this is a book that is not fantasy. It's gigantic. It's what, 1,500 pages long. Let's get a count on it here. Yeah. Oh no, it's 1,000 pages long. This is Battlefield Earth by L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Dianetics. This is just a gigantic science fiction space opera novel that I've actually read. I've actually read this thing, and I am mystified by it. Still, just mystified. The whole story of L. Ron Hubbard and Dianetics is just. It's just astonishing. I mean, it is so out in the open. I thought that the founding of Mormonism was out in the open, but this happened in the live light of day. L. Ron Hubbard was completely explicit about what he was doing from minute 1 to minute 2. This is a third-rate pulp author who decided to found a religion based on third-rate pulp science fiction concepts based on space aliens. I don't think that it has ever come to light. I'm pretty sure that L. Ron Hubbard has never had a normal full-dress biography. At least I've never read one. I wouldn't be surprised if that was because his church clamps down on that sort of thing. But I don't think that it has surfaced yet, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were letters out there that Hubbard wrote to whoever, John Campbell, whoever, Jack Williamson, saying, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to try this scam and see if it works. And probably letters that exist from them to him saying, it'll never happen. It's too transparent. And yet, Scientology exists and makes money and makes converts, even though it is bad science fiction. I mean, Mormonism is bad science fiction too, but it's cloaked in being a bad Tolkien ripoff. But Scientology is not anything of the kind. It's just a completely open scam, and yet it worked. And you might think that the best conclusion to that story would be if, oh sure, Scientology is an open scam and may murder people. They certainly enslave people. But the cute counterpoint is that L. Ron Hubbard's pulp science fiction is quite good. It's not. It's not at all. He's a bad writer. If you didn't know that from I guess we have to call it the theology of Scientology, which they keep under wraps because when you say it out loud, it sounds even more ridiculous than when you say out loud the theologies of most religions. When you look at it, you are not seeing good science fiction world building. You're seeing very bad science fiction world building. Just a complete fraud. But I don't have anything else by L. Ron Hubbard. Every once in a while, his distributor, whoever they are, will send me something with the L. Ron Hubbard banner on it or something like that. But I have Battlefield Earth just because it took me, I slogged through it one hot summer eons ago when it first came out. When did this came out? It had to be the 1980s. If it was going to come out anywhere, it would be in the 1980s. It had to be. And the lying starts right away on this thing. It's page after page after page of blurbs, but they're not for Battlefield Earth. They're specifically coached to look like they are, but they're not. 1984. Copyright 1982. All right, so that's the only science fiction on this shelf. Can't imagine that I will ever reread it, and yet I have it. I have a copy of it. Then we have... we'll finish up with one whole author. We have the author is Stephen R. Donaldson. I have a 2-volume fantasy that he did called Mordant's Need, The Mirror of Her Dreams, A Man Rides Through, which is it's a 2-volume story about a plain woman living in an apartment in our ordinary everyday world. That's kind of a Donaldson signature, to anchor his fantasies in our everyday world. When she learns of a mystical world where mirrors are magic, and it's overwritten. By this point, Donaldson was only overwriting, but it's, I think, quite good. There are parts of it that are a little creepy, but then again, the creepy parts are endemic to his fantasy because they're all over it. This is the series that he's most famous for, the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. This is book number 1 of trilogy number 1, Lord Fowl's Bane, and it's about an agrarian pre-medieval fantasy world called the Land that is being beset and threatened by a dark lord in the east who's assembling an army of all sorts of misshapen creatures and has a whole bunch of mystical powers on his own, and is bedeviled by but also covetous of a whole string of magical MacGuffins, and is opposed by the valiant ordinary people of the Land and also their mystical races and also wizards. And you hear that and you read that in this book and you think, all right, well, this is just an explicit Tolkien ripoff. Just as close as you can get without actually having the Tolkien estate contemplate literary action. And that is true. To an extent, that is true. I am a dogged defender of this trilogy and the following trilogy. I'm, in that limited sense, a dogged defender of Stephen R. Donaldson, in that I think he brings a lot of creativity of his own to his Tolkien ripoff. A lot. Like we saw with Clifford Seamack, with the Fellowship of the Talisman. Only this is far more elaborate and also far more earnest. The Fellowship of the Talisman has its tongue-in-cheek the whole time. There's no tongue-in-cheek humor in these books at all. Not whatsoever. But the number one thing that makes this series different is that the linchpin character, the anti-hero, is from our world, just like that woman in Morden's Need. The name Thomas Covenant is a best-selling writer in our world, who has everything in front of him. I've done read-alongs of these books, and he has everything in front of him. He has his whole life down pat. He's a beloved bestseller, has a wife, has a kid. When he contracts leprosy, and at first he doesn't think that it's leprosy. Who would think that it's leprosy? He doesn't have any idea what it is at first, and therefore ignores it, and as a result loses 2 fingers on one of his hands. They have to just be amputated because they're going gangrenous. And then he is taken to a leprosarium, and he learns all about the disease and all the things that he needs to do in order to protect his own health. His wife divorces him and takes the kid. The town where he lives doesn't want him. The minute they learn he's a leper, they don't want him anywhere around. They don't want him coming into town. And he is transported magically to the Land. And adventures ensue. And Lord Fowl's Bane it's very much a first book, and it's very, very derivative of Tolkien. It has its dramatic moments, but they're few and far between. And then there's a gap, and then we get the second book in the first trilogy, The Ill-Earth War, where Covenant returns to the Land. And this is a gigantically different thing from Lord Fowl's Bane. If you look at the 3 of them, the first trilogy, you think, okay, all of a type. No, not at all. This is a completely different reading experience. Much, much better reading experience. And it includes some elements. Again, the Land is at war with Lord Fowl. That's his actual name, is Lord Fowl. He couldn't come up with a better name than that. Lord Frederickson would have been better. But no. The Land is still at war with him. Thomas Covenant is still the linchpin of that victory or defeat. But there's a lot more going on in this book, including, for the first time ever, an epic fantasy that breaks down what's actually happening in terms of military logistics. Not once, but 3 times in the course of this one book that happens, and it's riveting. Absolutely riveting. There are a couple of chapters in this book. If you read the first book and you think, yeah, standard fantasy, interesting twist with the leper, then you read this book, you'll be blown away. And when you're done, there'll be a couple of scenes in here that you will never forget. And how true is that of any epic fantasy? Oh, the whole of the Rune Lords, I can't remember a single scene that stands out. But this, yeah. And then we have the third book in that series, The Power That Preserves. This is the concluding volume of the first trilogy of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. And in the last 100 pages are, again, incredibly overwritten. They're incredibly... Donaldson he really has a way with words, and that way is to bore the words to death. So you get a lot of prose here, and that's just going to get worse. Because when he finished with the first trilogy is really, really good. And then he did a second trilogy, starting with... oh no. Okay, there's a second copy of the Ill-Earth War. Okay. Well, that makes sense. It makes sense that I have two of those. Although, look at this. You type A people, you're not going to like this. They're done differently. Oh no. That's great that I would have two of those, but I don't appear to have a print copy of Volume 1 in the second trilogy, which is called The Wounded Land, and in which Thomas Covenant returns to the land, and there's a second human character who joins him, just like there's a second human character in the first trilogy. And Donaldson just lets go with his overwriting. Now, fortunately, although he overwrites, nothing's ever read. It's always sanguine, or something like that, or vermilion, or something. But although he lets go with the overwriting, he does have a knack for dramatic scenes. It never lets him down. His inventiveness in these two trilogies, I don't know about the third, not so keen on the third, or on the weird science fiction series that he wrote, but in these first two trilogies, you can definitely tell that you're dealing with someone who is genuinely creative, who thinks about good dramatic scenes. The Wounded Land has one of those. And the second book, The One Tree, has 4 or 5 of those terrific scenes. Just terrific scenes. As we voyage away from the land, the land is just one continent, of course. It's Western Europe. And in these series, we voyage away from that land. We see other parts of the whole mystical world that the land of which the land is a part. And then you have the concluding volume in this trilogy, The White Gold Wielder. All with these Dalkay Suite covers, all just terrific. In their own way, they are bloated, but they are terrific. White Gold Wielder is, boy oh boy. I mean, there are some scenes in The One Tree, there are a couple of scenes in here that will just get to you. They just work. That's all there is to it. But that's kind of odd that I would bother to keep those two, but not even have a copy of The Wounded Land. That's a bit odd. Well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So that is this shelf, and I was right. It was entirely possible to do in a timely video. Not 20 minutes, but close enough. So now we are done with shelf number 4. And we're done with shelves as well, because after this we go on to the top of this bookcase, which doesn't have any shelves, and so I have done what all of you would do, which is just to stack things skyward as high as they will go. And I just figured out, I think, a way that will work to film that without putting myself in danger. So we will see if that's true. I will be crowing the next time if I get it to work. But in the meantime, that's going to be it for this shelf. We're almost... Oh, no, we're not. No, I was going to say we're almost done with this bookcase. We're only about halfway done with this bookcase. But sooner or later, we will finish bookcase number 2. Then it'll be on to bookcase number 3, back on the floor. Anyway, I'll wrap this up, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.